In the latest chapter of The Bold and the Beautiful, a heart-wrenching tragedy unfolds that threatens to shatter the lives of everyone in the Forrester family, starting with Finn. What was supposed to be a quiet retreat for Steffy in Europe has spiraled into an unimaginable nightmare, leaving devastation in its wake and forever altering the course of the Finnegan-Forrester legacy. It began as a simple getaway. Steffy needed space. With so many pressures back home, both personal and professional, she made the decision to take Hayes and travel to Europe for rest, reflection, and some much-needed peace. No one could have foreseen how catastrophically things would unravel. While out shopping with Hayes at a local supermarket in the south of France, an unforeseen accident took place. Witnesses recalled the chaos. An out-of-control delivery truck barreled into the parking lot, crashing through barriers and plowing into several shoppers. Screams, sirens, and chaos ensued. In the aftermath, ambulances rushed the injured to the nearest hospital. Among them were Steffy and her young son Hayes. Back in Los Angeles, Finn received the first call late at night. His breath caught in his throat as the caller's voice trembled through the line. His heart raced. He could barely grasp the words. Hayes had been hurt. Steffy was in critical condition. 1,000 fears and questions filled his mind, but none mattered more than getting to Europe immediately. Finn boarded the first available flight, gripped by anxiety, panic, and helplessness that twisted his soul with every passing hour in the air. His wife, his world, was in danger. And his son, his little boy, might never be the same again. By the time Finn arrived at the hospital, the situation had taken a turn for the worse. Steffy had been rushed into emergency surgery after showing signs of internal bleeding. Her injuries were far more severe than initially thought. The medical team scrambled to save her, unaware that her husband was a world-renowned doctor now standing just outside the operating room, desperate for a miracle. But it was not to be. A doctor emerged, his eyes downcast, his expression solemn. Time froze. Finn, already trembling, held his breath. The words hit like a blade to the chest. Steffy did not survive. She had succumbed to extensive internal bleeding. Despite every effort, the blood loss had been too much. Finn fell back against the cold hospital wall, unable to breathe. It felt like his heart had stopped. And then came the second blow, perhaps crueler than the first. Steffy had been pregnant. No one had known. Not even her. It was too early to show, but the autopsy confirmed what the trauma team discovered on the operating table. She was carrying a child, his child. The pain doubled, then tripled, echoing through Finn's soul like a scream he could never release. In one day, he lost his wife, his unborn child, and nearly his sanity. Hayes survived, but just barely. The boy suffered a fractured skull and a collapsed lung. He was sedated and monitored closely. Finn clung to his son like a lifeline. This small, fragile being was all he had left of Steffy now. Every breath Hayes took became a prayer. Every twitch, a flicker of hope. But for Finn, grief roared louder than hope. Back in Los Angeles, the news sent shockwaves through the Forrester family. Ridge was inconsolable, collapsing into Brooke's arms upon hearing the news. Taylor, already consumed with guilt over past mistakes, descended into a fresh spiral of despair. Thomas could barely speak, numb with rage and disbelief. Hope, Liam, and even Sheila, all of them, in their own ways, felt the magnitude of this loss. The world had shifted. A bright star in their family had been extinguished. But no one was more broken than Finn. He refused to leave the hospital. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't rest. He sat beside Hayes' bed, holding his tiny hand, whispering promises into the sterile air. Memories of Steffy flooded his mind, her laugh, her strength, her relentless love for their family. Her passion, her resilience, her touch, now gone, forever. And all he could do was sit in silence and ache. As the days passed, the media caught wind of the tragedy. Paparazzi swarmed the hospital in Europe, desperate for photos, quotes, anything. Finn lashed out at them, shielding Hayes from the glare of the cameras. Eventually, Eric Forrester sent private security and a legal team to clear the press away. But nothing could protect Finn from the memories or the silence. 1 week later, Hayes opened his eyes. Finn cried for the first time since Steffy's death. Real tears, painful, cathartic, overwhelming. He kissed his son's forehead and promised him something that would define every action he took from that moment forward. "I'll make sure you remember her. Every single day." But promises were not enough to stop the darkness clawing at his spirit. Finn became distant, detached, haunted. Once the hospital cleared Hayes for travel, they returned to Los Angeles, but the home they returned to no longer felt like a home. Everything reminded him of her. Her perfume lingered on the pillows. Her scarf hung on the back of a chair. Her voice echoed in every room. He began to unravel in silence. Family tried to help. Ridge invited him to stay at the Forrester mansion. Taylor suggested grief counseling. Hope offered to babysit Hayes. Liam, surprisingly, stepped up to support Finn, knowing that their children were now forever bonded by grief. Even Sheila, in an uncharacteristically human moment, reached out to Finn with raw emotion, attempting to share in his loss. But Finn wanted none of it. He immersed himself in work, in Hayes, in distraction. But nothing worked. Sleep eluded him. Food had no taste. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the operating room doors, the blood-stained linens, the doctor's face. The void in his chest widened with each passing day. He began to hallucinate, seeing glimpses of Steffy in crowds, hearing her voice calling his name. He would wake up in a cold sweat, clutching the pillow where her head used to rest. Then came the guilt. Why wasn't he there? Why didn't he fly out sooner? What if he had taken her on that trip himself? What if he had seen the signs of her pregnancy earlier? What if? The questions consumed him. He started to question his abilities as a doctor, as a husband, and even as a father. For a moment, Finn contemplated walking away from medicine altogether. But when Hayes cried out in the night, frightened, confused, needing comfort, it reminded Finn that his purpose had not died with Steffy. Still, recovery was not a straight path. On what would have been Steffy's birthday, Finn collapsed at her grave, whispering apologies into the soil. Thomas found him there, broken and slumped, and carried him home like a brother. That moment marked a shift. A quiet beginning to healing. In the weeks that followed, Finn took small steps. He accepted Taylor's invitation to a grief support group. He let Brooke take Hayes to the park. He returned to the hospital, not as a doctor, but as a father, showing Hayes where he had once saved lives, hoping it would give meaning to his mother's death. And eventually, he spoke. At a memorial held at Forrester Creations, surrounded by friends and family, Finn gave a eulogy that left everyone in tears. He spoke of Steffy's courage, her passion, her love. He promised to raise Hayes with the same fire she carried in her soul. He spoke not as a man destroyed by grief, but as one slowly climbing from its depths. Steffy's death had shattered him, yes, but it had also clarified what mattered most. Steffy may be gone, but her spirit lived on. In Hayes' smile. In Finn's heart. In every thread sewn into a Forrester gown. In every wave crashing on the Malibu shore she loved so much. Her story was not over. And neither was Finn's. But no one would ever forget the moment the light dimmed. The moment the accident stole everything. The moment Steffy Forrester's name became a whisper carried on the winds of grief, longing, and enduring love. The shocking death of Steffy Forrester sent seismic waves throughout Los Angeles, plunging not only her family into grief, but also sending her husband, Dr. John Finn Finnegan, into a harrowing spiral of despair. Following the tragic accident in Europe that claimed Steffy's life and that of her unborn child, Finn returned home broken, barely functioning, consumed by an unbearable grief that stripped him of his identity, his sense of direction, and his emotional footing. For Finn, Steffy was more than a partner. She was his purpose, his grounding force, the person who rescued him from the emotional void he never realized he had lived in. Now she was gone, and every breath he took in her absence felt like a betrayal to the love they shared. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, silent mornings, and a numbness that clung to his bones. He barely spoke. He barely moved. The walls of their shared home, once filled with laughter and warmth, became cold tombs of memories he couldn't bear to touch. Hayes, his little boy, was the only reason he kept going, but even then, Finn often sat in silence, staring blankly as others helped care for the child, unable to bridge the chasm between his grief and his responsibilities. The funeral for Steffy was held at the Forrester estate, surrounded by a garden of white roses and a stunned crowd that included not only family, but the entire social and fashion elite of Los Angeles. It wasn't just the death of a daughter, wife, and mother. It was the loss of a Forrester, a pillar of the family's empire and one of the strongest voices in the company's modern evolution. Rich Forrester was barely able to contain himself as he stood by the casket, holding Brooke's hand but barely feeling her touch. Thomas Forrester remained stoic, trying to hold himself together for his father and for Douglas, but inside he was shattered. Taylor Hayes wept uncontrollably, blaming herself for not convincing Steffy to stay in Los Angeles. Even Eric Forrester, the patriarch of the family, struggled to deliver his eulogy. His voice cracked as he described Steffy's fierce loyalty, her unmatched creativity, and the fire in her spirit that no one could replicate. As for Finn, he stood alone, isolated in grief. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He merely stared at the coffin, the silence around him louder than any scream he could have uttered. The entire town seemed to freeze. For a moment, the endless affairs, betrayals, and scheming that normally consumed the residents of Los Angeles were forgotten. No one cared about corporate power plays or romantic rivalries. The death of Steffy cast a shadow so large that it brought even the most relentless troublemakers to a standstill. Liam Spencer, who had once shared a deep history with Steffy, stood among the mourners, struggling with guilt and sorrow, recalling every moment they'd shared. Hope Logan held his hand, knowing how deeply this loss cut him too. Even Sheila Carter, whose dark past with Steffy and Finn should have disqualified her from attending, appeared in the back of the crowd, her face unusually solemn, her eyes red-rimmed with tears she didn't expect to shed. There was no drama that could eclipse this moment. There was only loss. In the days after the funeral, the reality of Steffy's absence began to set in across all corners of the Forrester universe. Forrester Creations went eerily quiet. Meetings were postponed. Fashion shows were canceled. Steffy's office door remained shut. Her nameplate remained untouched. No one dared remove her belongings. Ridge avoided the building altogether. Thomas attempted to keep the design team motivated, but there was a hollowness to every fabric, a lifelessness to every sketch. Her absence was not just personal, it was professional. She had been the heart of Forrester's modern vision. Without her, the future seemed unmoored. For Finn, the days following the funeral only deepened his descent. He avoided calls. He refused therapy. Friends and family came and went, offering support, but their words felt like paper on fire, brief and meaningless. Hayes would cry out in the night, and Finn would sit beside his crib, whispering stories about Steffy, clinging to the belief that if he kept her memory alive, maybe she wasn't truly gone. But that wasn't healing, it was survival. And Finn wasn't surviving. He was drowning. Behind the scenes, however, the soap opera world faced its own realities. The tragic on-screen death of Steffy came as actress Jacqueline McInnes would prepared for her real-life maternity leave. Her extended absence from The Bold and the Beautiful left a gaping void in both the storyline and the emotional fabric of the show. Fans, long accustomed to Steffy's fiery presence, were now left wondering, how long would they have to endure this silence? Could the show sustain itself without one of its most powerful characters? Jacqueline's portrayal of Steffy had become a cornerstone of B&B. Whether she was battling Brooke, navigating complicated relationships with Liam and Finn, or running Forrester with unmatched elegance and fire, Steffy was more than a main character. She was an icon. Her sudden exit, though explained through an emotional and powerful storyline, left fans heartbroken, confused, and anxious. Social media lit up with messages of grief, tributes, and speculation. Would Steffy return after Jacqueline's maternity leave? Was this truly the end, or a dramatic setup for an eventual resurrection? Soap opera history is no stranger to miraculous comebacks, but for now, Steffy was gone, and fans were left to mourn with Finn. The show's writers used this moment of real-life transition to dig deep into themes rarely explored with such raw honesty. Finn's depression became the central arc, allowing viewers to witness a man of science unravel in the face of emotion. The layers of grief, denial, and collapse were portrayed with gut-wrenching accuracy. His scenes became slower, darker, more introspective. He refused help from Taylor, from Ridge, from Brooke. Even when Zend, Paris, and Carter tried to intervene, he pushed them away. He began to isolate, forgetting appointments, failing to show up to the hospital, leaving people concerned that he might not recover. Yet through all this darkness, The Bold and the Beautiful planted subtle seeds of long-term potential. Hayes, the innocent child caught in this storm, became the symbol of hope. Each scene with the toddler revealed cracks in Finn's armor, moments when he almost smiled, almost cried, almost remembered how to live. Viewers began to hope too, that perhaps Finn's journey through grief wouldn't just be a temporary arc, but a layered, evolving story of recovery, resilience, and ultimately redemption. Still, nothing would move forward too quickly. The show made a deliberate choice to pause, to let Steffy's death echo, to allow the town, the family, and the audience to grieve without distraction. And in doing so, The Bold and the Beautiful found something rare in daytime television's stillness. A breath between storms. A reminder that even in a world of nonstop betrayal and seduction, loss demands reverence. And yet, time does not stand still in Los Angeles. Whispers of returning rivalries began to bubble beneath the surface. Brooke's guilt over past conflicts with Steffy made her more protective over Ridge, drawing sharp glances from Taylor. Liam, emotionally adrift, found himself spending more time with Hope but increasingly lost in thoughts of what might have been with Steffy. Thomas, consumed by vengeance, began quietly investigating the truck accident in Europe, suspecting that what happened to Steffy may not have been as accidental as it seemed. Sheila, once again, hovered on the outskirts, her presence increasingly suspicious. As always, chaos was waiting. But out of respect for Steffy, no one dared move too fast. The question looming over it all, however, wasn't about the characters, it was about the audience. Could the fans of The Bold and the Beautiful endure a prolonged absence of one of the show's most dynamic forces? Could the daily drama survive without the storm that was Steffy Forrester? The answer, though uncertain, leaned toward yes, but not without cost. Viewers were loyal, but their patience had limits. They wanted hope. They wanted closure. They wanted a reason to believe that this wasn't the end. For now, they have Finn broken, grieving, but still breathing. And in him, the writers offer a vessel of healing. Through his pain, the show may chart a new course. And perhaps one day, when Jacqueline McInnes Wood is ready, a door will creak open, a shadow will move in the distance, and Steffy Forrester will return, not just as a memory, but as a miracle. Until then, the world of The Bold and the Beautiful stands still in grief, forever changed by the loss of a woman who refused to be ordinary.
Oh.